Hello. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Laureate Conversation. I'm Miriam Joko, and today's conversation is going to be fun. I can tell you guys that. So today's conversation is one of the very special kind of conversation where it's not just about talking about fiction books, it's more about a conversation that makes you pause and look inward. We're discussing a book that feels like something you read. You don't just read, I mean, but something you sit down with, something that you think about. So yeah, and I'm joined by an author whose work explores spirituality, not just as an escape or just as a guide, but as a return, something you look deeper into, something emotional, something you connect to. I hope I'm right. So it's his book, Finding What Was Never Lost, is a pocket guide for spiritual insight and inspiration. But beyond that, it's a quiet invitation to reflect, to question everything we think we know about ourselves, about spirituality, about religion. It's a lot of book to reflect on. So yeah, it's no surprise that this book won the best self-help book for the 2026 African Laureate Awards. So joining me today, all the way from Amsterdam, we have Alexander, then Heijer. I hope I got your surname right.
You do. Wonderful.
Thank you. And by the way, so Alexander, welcome to the Laureate Conversation. It's a pleasure to have you here and congratulations on your award.
Thank you so much, Mariam, and thanks for inviting me. I'm very honored to have received this award.
Hmm. Welcome, you're welcome. So I like to do something for my guests where we do a little bit of a warm up, just to play a little game before we get started. So let's go. So the first game is going to be this or that. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's just start. This or that, silence or music.
Ooh, that's a difficult one. You start
Oh.
with the most difficult one. I would say for now, silence.
That's interesting. Mm.
I
Okay,
mean, I went to a concert yesterday,
okay.
and the most beautiful part of it was the end, 2 seconds before the audience started applauding. It
Wow.
lasted 2 seconds, and that
2 seconds.
silence was more beautiful than the music.
But what about when you write? Which would you prefer?
Sorry again?
What about when you write? Which would you prefer?
Well, I try to write from silence.
Hmm.
Maybe I even try to write so that it evokes silence, inner silence in
Hmm.
people. But I need to use words as a writer, but I want to
Yeah.
point beyond the words. So I hope
Hmm.
that the books bring people to a state of silence, inner silence or stillness.
Hmm. I like that. I like that. I like that. So that brings me to my next question. Thinking or observing.
Observing.
Hmm. I guess right. I have already guessed in my mind you're going to pick observing. I guessed right. So the next one, logic or intuition?
Intuition by far.
By far. Why? Why did you say by far,
Well, I've been very interested in how logic and intuition function, but also I see that in modern society, especially here in the West,
Yeah.
we have um, forgotten about intuition a bit.
Hmm.
We've done a lot of things on logic, and which is fine, but logic can also be lifeless. And
Hmm.
in my view, intuition is connected to life. Logic thinks about life. It thinks about reality. It reasons. It deducts, but it is not present in reality. And intuition
Hmm.
connects us to life and to reality. And intuition, if you look at it from the past, for example, how Plato and some of the Greek philosophers thought about it, they
Yes.
saw intuition as um, a way of seeing the totality of reality
Reality.
in its totality, like the
Hmm.
way a landscape shows itself to the eyes in its totality. That's what they thought of as intuition. They called it nous.
Hmm.
And that was the
Yes.
highest form of thinking, the highest form They called it even like godly thinking, like divine thinking. And logic or reasoning, they called it dianoia, which was a bit lower. It reasons about, it thinks about reality, but doesn't have the direct insight. So that's why I prefer intuition. If
Mm.
you use intuition properly, it leads to a direct insight into experience, into reality, rather than
Yes. True.
contemplating or thinking about it.
Yes. So it's just like you going with intuition, what you think is the best. I mean, it
I
makes a
mean,
lot of
use logic,
sense.
use your mind, use logic, use reasoning. Um, but the best thing would be like a marriage between intuition and logic in
Hmm.
my view.
That makes a lot of sense, really. I get your explanation. So, okay, this is that routine or being spontaneous.
Being spontaneous.
Mm.
I'm not so good with routines. I have my routines,
Okay.
but only so that I can be spontaneous.
Mm. Makes a lot of sense. So, okay. What about knowing or wondering?
Oh, wondering, but
You don't
because
want to know something?
I almost wanted to say knowing. Oh, this is a difficult one. The reason why this is a difficult one, because my mind always wants to know,
Yeah,
and sometimes it
that's
thinks
a
it already
creative
knows.
who always wants to know.
However, there's a problem in it, especially with my practice of meditation and my
Hmm.
exploration of Eastern philosophy. It's often said in those traditions that if you want to know reality, beware of your knowledge.
Hmm.
The reason they say that is because our knowledge, our facts, our ideas, our stories, everything we have in our mind that we think we know, we place that or project that onto reality, and then we stop wondering because we think we know what it is. But the question is,
Oh,
do we really know? They said that Socrates was the wisest man alive in his days.
yeah.
Why? Because he knew he didn't know anything.
You didn't know anything.
And
Yes.
not knowing opens a space for reality to have a genuine encounter with reality
But at,
without placing our assumptions onto it.
hmm,
And
true.
that brings us back in some way to what religious people talk about innocence, the innocence of the child. The innocence of the child shouldn't be seen as like a moral innocence, but an experiential innocence, the innocence of wonder, like seeing something for the first time.
Wonder, saying what's in
Like,
there.
wow. And I think the reason I would say wonder is because if you can live from this place of not knowing and recognize your own ignorance, then the world opens up again as if you've seen it for the first time. And that
Hmm.
wonder is the amazement of life,
Makes a
way
lot
more
of
so than
sense.
the curiosity that just wants to grasp things and know it.
Hmm.
That's what I would say.
That makes a lot of sense, really. It does, it does. So let's move into the last one. Meditation or conversation.
Meditation.
Of
I
course.
love conversations,
Mhm.
but I think true meditation, my conversations become better and more
Hmm.
genuine, more truthful, uh, and more there's more attention. So I would say meditation is the basis, but I love conversation, so it's a difficult one.
Yeah, it's true.
They're all difficult. You're asking difficult questions, but really good ones.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Interesting. I enjoyed the way you analyze your answer and the reasoning and everything. I feel like your answers already reflect on the themes in your book. I think so. I hope so. But
They
let's
do,
just get
yeah.
yeah, let's get to know you more. Let's get to the book. Yeah, so are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so before we get to the book, let's get to know you. Let's get to, because you've already shared quite a bit about yourself in introduction in your book, which I really appreciate because it gives ground to let people see this book as a lived experience, not just as something where, you just get to write to people, we call motivational books sometimes aspire to inspire kind of book, but I mean, it feels like I can relate to what is happening in the book. So I really appreciate that introduction. But I would like to
Mhm.
know more about you. Who is Alexander? Beyond the author, beyond the ideas, beyond the creativity. Who are you? Let's get that.
Well, that's a question. Are there some things you would like to know specifically?
I mean, I would like to know how you started writing, your journey, what other things you do beyond writing.
Well, I think all my writing has come from um, perhaps from a question. I
Hmm.
think as long as I can remember, and this is only looking backwards, I can already see that much of my writing, and before the writing, the exploring and the studying and the thinking, was all born from the question, why is it that modern society, and especially the corporate world, feels so empty, so devoid of meaning?
Hmm.
And I've always wondered about that question, and that put me on a search, a quest to understand myself. What is it about me that I'm lacking a sense of meaning or depth or maybe connection? But it also has driven me or it invited me maybe to explore the world's wisdom tradition. So I've explored a lot of philosophy, East and West, religion, spirituality, psychology, for the past 15 years. But all of it, I think, is started with this question. Why is it that modern society, especially here where I'm from,
Hmm.
and the corporate world feels so empty, so devoid of meaning? It's as if the soul is lacking in the modern world.
What?
And I think what I've been searching for is the soul,
Hmm.
both on a personal level, but also on a more collective level, in the sense that people, especially in the Netherlands, we don't talk about the soul anymore. It's weird. We can't, because we can't scientifically prove it, so we don't talk about it anymore. So that's what has driven me, the sense of emptiness, the alienation. And when I started finding some answers, not the answer, but some answers that I felt like, oh, this is interesting, this helps me. At some point, organically, I started writing out of inspiration, and I started sharing thoughts, and it resonated with people, and then it expanded. And before I knew, I had a book, and then I had a second one. But it all came from, yeah, I would say my own personal quest to find back, to recollect or remember perhaps the soul,
Hmm.
whatever that means.
Mm. Yeah, to remember what it means to write from your soul, to do what
Yeah,
you want to do from your soul. The outside world is a little bit more pragmatic when it's like there's already a routine for everyone. There's a way you're meant to do something, you're meant to live. But questioning the inner meaning of all these things makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And
So
just being creative.
the reason why I say this is because when I was at school,
Okay.
I always felt like I didn't really understand what I was doing there. It was as if everyone was prepared to work in some kind of man-made machine. And then I went to the corporate world, I went to work, and it felt as if we try to put life, which is organic, spontaneous, we put it
Yeah.
in like a linear, artificial system. And for me, that felt suffocating. It felt empty. It felt
Hmm.
devoid of meaning. So I was looking at like, what is the meaning of all this? There should be a deeper meaning. And that, I think, was the starting point
Mm, that makes a
to
lot of
search for
sense.
answers. Yeah.
It does. I could really relate to your journey. Really, I can understand where you're coming from. You also
And
spoke
that's why I
of
think the book Finding What Was Never Lost, the title refers to that, whatever that is. Some people may call it the soul, some people might call it finding God, finding whatever. There's names
what
for it.
never lost. It's always there.
I don't give it words. The reason is because that's for everyone else. And to be honest, you can't put it in words. But finding what
Mm,
was never lost is about remembering what you somehow have always known, but forgotten you have known it.
mm, mm,
And finding it is is about some kind of inner peace or joy or a quiet joy maybe,
Mm.
which has to do about accepting your existence, um, connecting with people, contributing, but living from the soul instead of from expectation of others. Yeah, I think that's a little bit what my journey comes from.
I think you already answered my next question, but I also just love to add a little bit to that because I enjoyed how you explained the title. Because I was just about to ask, what does finding means to you? Because it feels like a contradiction. It feels like
Yeah.
something. It's like a recurring idea in the book where it's like searching for what was never lost. What is like it has always been there. You're just looking for it in the wrong direction. So. Why do you think people feel so lost in the first place?
Well, I can't speak for much for other people individually, but I can see that a lot of people are lost because our world is devoid of meaning in some sense. Because
Hmm.
we have, especially where I'm from in the Netherlands, we have, for the past 400 years, we have built such a big machine, like a man-made machine, with a big social machine around it to control the whole machine. But the
Yeah.
machine has become so complex that
Hmm.
no one really has a grip on it or can really control it anymore. And what I see happening is that instead of the machine serving humans, it's turned around. Humans are serving now the
The
machine.
machines.
And I think many people become alienated. Um, Alienated also because we've lost connection with ourselves, with other people, with nature, with the transcendent, because we are now the world is changing so fast, and because of the technological developments,
Hmm.
society is changing faster and faster. To keep up, we have to move
Always
faster
have
and
to
faster.
keep move faster. Yes.
And the problem is, if you're moving all the time, it's really hard to truly connect with yourself, with other people, with nature, because there's no inner stillness. There's no room for the soul to breathe,
Hmm.
to
There's
connect,
no
to
room for the
contribute.
soul to breathe.
And so, in some way, what I try to do with my books is to make people aware of that which is never lost. Now, what is it that is never lost? This comes from my teacher. My teacher used to say to me, Alex, you're constantly searching for something that is missing, but perhaps you can search for that which has already been there. And I never understood what he meant. So the whole journey wasn't about finding something, it was about shifting my perspective on life, seeing it differently, seeing myself differently, seeing the world differently. And and I think what it comes down to is not to see your life as some kind of individual project, that's linear, that you need to reach some big goal in the future, but rather to see that life fundamentally is relational.
Hmm.
Everything depends on everything else, and you're always in a relation. And life is now, this moment. This moment is the only place where there is life. And I think what I hope that my book does is to bring people back to the here and now and to that which is never lost, which is awareness, attention. Uh, and awareness, I think, and attention are some key features of it.
That makes a lot of sense.
In other
That's
words,
a
it's about presence.
presence.
Presence, yeah.
Hmm. Being
One
in
of
the
my
moment.
teachers used to call himself a teacher of presence. I like that word.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Or was there a specific moment that makes you feel okay? It's high time I talk about this. It's high time I talk about spirituality. Was there a specific moment in your life that makes you feel because your book it feels just everything in the experience feels so lived that it feels well grounded that you've had this experience. So What was that turning
Mhm.
point for you that made you realize, you know what, I really need to write about this. I really need to talk about this.
It's not one moment. There are several
Mm,
moments. It's more like gradual. It's gradual. It's almost but there are a few elements that have been very important. One of them is meditation. So in 2017, I started Vipassana meditation. Vipassana means seeing things as they are. It's a very ancient form of meditation, tracing back all the way to the Buddha. And that was in 2017. I participated in a 10-day silent retreat. And for me, that was the starting point of a journey. It had already started, the spiritual journey, about 10 years before that, when I started reading books such as the book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, which made a tremendous impact on me already. But after I started meditating, then it became something else because then I really started experiencing these things in reality, in the here and now. And throughout my practice, I practice every day meditation. Gradually, I would say I landed more and more into reality. I learned more and more or I started seeing reality differently. Before that, I always looked at the future to give me something. You know, if I have this, then that. If I have this, then I will be happy. Instead of looking inward and realizing, hey, maybe this search itself, this idea that happiness is somewhere there, maybe that is the problem.
mm,
And I do remember a particular moment which was beautiful. I think in one of the retreats I did, I was sitting in silence at some point, and I think it was 8 days of meditation and silence, no talking with people. At some point, it became so quiet in my heart, in myself, that I realized that there's a quiet joy there that has always been there,
mm,
just from being present. And when I realized that, I was like, this is interesting. It's as if I've been looking for this my whole life, but it's already here. I just didn't pay attention to it. My mind was too much worried about the future, too much going forward or backward in the past, all the things I did that I didn't like, or or in the future, all the things I want and don't want. But
yes.
just being here in this moment with the person next to me or wherever I was, I completely overlooked that. And at some point it hit me that, hey, I don't need this big why to live or this big goal or whatever. And then I thought maybe life is not about achieving something or getting somewhere. Maybe the whole point of it is it's a relationship. How do I relate? Not how do I achieve my goals, but also how do I relate to my goals? How do I relate to other people? How do I relate to the world around me? How do I relate to all that? I started realizing, hey, the whole thing is a, and perhaps if I make it bigger, perhaps the modern crisis we see with everything going on, maybe it's a relational crisis because people forget how to be in relationship with one another, how to relate to one another with attention, with care. And yeah, and so that was quite a big moment. That was in the retreat that I realized that. And the shocking effect was also that when I came back, I remember that I had a few meetings, I think 3 meetings on a day with some corporate clients at the time. And they were all super stressed and like, we need to do this, we need to do this. And
So it's like
I was
that.
sitting in the meeting and I was like, my God, this is too intense. What are we doing? I don't want
Mm,
to do this anymore. So it also took a long time for me to adjust again, to adjust myself to the fast-paced society I live in. But that is a gradual process, and that's become better and better. But
mm,
I'm still struggling with that sometimes.
that's interesting.
Because I also, as a writer, I need a lot of time for contemplation and silence to structure my thinking, to think ideas through, but also to contemplate. I would say that's the right word. I need a lot of time to contemplate, and so I always need time to withdraw myself from the busyness. Otherwise, I can't write very well. But I also need to live in the world, which is pretty busy. So that's always the an interesting
Yes,
dynamic.
and yeah, an interesting dynamic indeed. That's interesting. I love the way, through the moment you had like a peace, inner peace with yourself, you realize that, you know what? I think I could do better for myself. I think I'm not built for the certain things I'm going through. I really like that. I think we all need to normalize that. We all need to embrace that as a society. Because personally, I always feel like meditation, really, I would like to ask, how does it work? Because at what point did you realize, okay, I need to start meditating? And how did you get started? Because it's something I've always wanted to do. But it's just like, growing up in a city like Lagos where there's like everywhere is noisy, everywhere is like
Mm.
how do you find your inner peace? Because sometimes you just want a moment of solitude where you just want to just have a self-reflection through meditation. So how does meditation work for you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I remember when I came back from my first meditation retreat in 2017, I was living in a city center of Amsterdam, which had a lot of there was a lot of noise. When I was sitting in my room, I heard the trams, people shouting on the streets. So I was like, how can I meditate? Well, at the time I had a practical solution, which was noise canceling headphones. But at
Yes.
some point, I also learned to just sit in meditation with
Mm-hmm.
the noise and to not pay too much attention about what's going on, but just to focus on my breathing. Um, because at the end, the meditation that I practice, Vipassana means seeing things as they are. It's an insight meditation. The point of it is to really get insight into, hey, what's really going on here? Um, and eventually that leads to very interesting findings. But the whole point of it, as the Buddha talked about the path, the spiritual path, is about overcoming suffering. But therefore, you need to have a
Mm-hmm.
deep insight into what suffering is, and what causes suffering. And from the Buddha's perspective, what causes suffering is attachment and craving. So that's where you work with in meditation. My one of my teachers used to say to me, there are only two problems in life. Either there's something you don't want, or you want something that isn't there. And in meditation, you just sit with it. You don't try to attach yourself or cling to what you want, and you don't try to develop aversion to what you don't want. But you do that on the level of the body. So on the level of the sensations. So to give you an example, when I sit in meditation, what usually happens is I get a pain in my knee if I long enough, or I get the pain in my back. Now the mind is very quick to develop aversion. Oh, I don't want this back pain. Why me? Get rid of this pain. I can't meditate. So then you're already developing aversion. Or there's a very beautiful sensation. Maybe you feel like goosebumps and you're like, wow, I want to feel more of this. And then you're in craving. Now, the whole point of the meditation is to not react with craving or aversion and to just sit with whatever is. And then you learn something interesting, which means non attachment. What that is actually is that there's more space around all the sensations and everything that's going on. You develop more spaciousness. That doesn't mean the problems in your life go away, but there's more space around it, more breathing space. And as a result, it's easier to stay with them, to look at them, instead of running from them. And that's
Mm.
the practice. Even if it's busy, you're hearing a lot of noises outside, they might distract you, but you can also use them uh, just to notice when you're distracted, just to come back to the breathing or to the present moment and not pay too much attention. And also to watch how your mind works, because usually your mind starts judging, like, why is this person screaming on the streets? What is he thinking? And then you're judging, or you're judging yourself for the fact that you're judging. And before you know, the whole mind is very busy. But once you notice that, the point is to go back out, away from the story in your mind, and just back to the present moment. to the breath or to the sensations.
Mm,
And that's a
I see.
continuous practice. There's nothing to achieve in meditation. That's not a good meditation or a bad meditation. The whole point is just to sit and to watch the sensations without developing craving or aversion. Does it make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, doing more watching and talking, doing more observing. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. I think I need to start working. You said something about getting a teacher. I'll work on that as well. Thank you. Okay, so now let's get to you said something about sufferness, and it reminds me of the very first theme of your book, sufferness, suffering. What was the idea about? Is it because of the practice of Buddhism that talks about suffering? That was why you made the very first idea to talk about.
That's a good question. The sound, I can't hear you very properly. The sound is a bit off. But I do get the
Oh,
gist of your question. So,
okay.
you asked me why suffering, why I start with suffering in the book.
Yes, yes.
Well, there's a few reasons. One of the reasons is that most people get to spirituality from a place of suffering. They're suffering and they want a solution. And they go and search and they end up in a meditation retreat maybe or at yoga or something else. Maybe they're stressed, maybe they are feel lack of connection to life or whatever. It can be all sorts of suffering. So usually the path stop there. Not always. Sometimes it's sheer inspiration and people want to know more about it, but often I notice it's suffering. And also because the Buddha said that life is suffering. The first noble truth, the first truth that the Buddha mentioned was life is dukkha. And dukkha is often translated as suffering, but a better translation might be unsatisfactoriness. There's like this unsatisfactoriness about life. And that's often where you start from to go into that. Like, what is this unsatisfactoriness? What is this suffering? Let's look at it like a scientist, like studying in the lab, but then studying yourself. Like, what is this suffering? What's going on here? And at some point, you will notice that a lot of the suffering comes from the unwillingness to just sit with your unpleasant emotions.
Mm. Oh,
We
maybe
want to
such
run
a
away from them,
such a
and then we start suffering from them.
yeah,
So that's
true.
why in some traditions they say that there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable, life hurts, but the suffering is optional. That's what some say. What they mean by that is that let's imagine you're experiencing pain. For example, heartbreak. Heartbreak can be painful, right? I've suffered some heartbreaks, they're always painful. Now, the suffering comes when you start um, resisting the pain. You say, why am I suffering this? Why always me? Then it becomes a
Mm.
narrative in your mind that doesn't want to feel it, that starts arguing with it. And that's the whole suffering. Instead of just accepting the grief that you experience, the pain, and just to sit with it, we start to resist it. So when we start resisting what is, then the suffering starts. And that's why I mentioned in the book named Nisargadatta Maharaj. And at some point, he talked about suffering and that it is an illusion. I'm not sure if he used those words, but there was a student who became angry and said, "What do you mean? I am suffering. I'm experiencing suffering right now." And then Nisargadatta seems to have said, "No, you're not experiencing suffering. You are suffering, you're experiencing." Now, that might sound very paradoxical, but what he means is that when we say I experience suffering, there's often just a very unpleasant sensation, an unpleasant emotion, something that's hard to be with, to bear. the question is, what is the suffering? Is the suffering the emotion, or is it the fact that we don't want this emotion to feel? We don't want this.
Mm.
We want to get rid of it. And a lot of meditation practice is just to learn to feel what you're feeling. Great conversations, wonderful. Don't cling to them. If you're feeling pain, feel pain. Don't develop aversion. And that is how you eventually experience more inner freedom, experience life as it is, without a reactionary mind that judges, that creates stories about it. Um, so that life at some point becomes a bit easier, less reactive, more present, more connected. Because
Mm.
when we don't bring our pain into connection, it becomes suffering. You see that a lot with people that isolate. They're suffering, they
Yes.
isolate, and the
You're
suffering becomes more.
isolating. Yeah.
But maybe you've experienced this yourself. If you are suffering or you're in pain, and you speak to someone about it, and the person just reacts compassionately,
Feel feel a lot
then you're in
better.
connection, and the pain becomes already less.
Yes. Yeah.
So, so those are some of the things that meditation has taught me, at least,
Mm.
and that's what I talk about in the book.
Yeah. So aside from suffering, I love how you structure the book into the seven S. The suffering, sincerity, stillness, surrender, shape, simplicity, and the last one, serenity. How important was that for you by writing the book? Is this something that you just
Mhm.
feel like, okay, when you wanted to write, you're like, okay, this is how I want it to be structured. This is how I want to this is where I want to talk about and what I want to talk about. Or is this something that probably after writing everything, you said, okay, maybe it's better to do this. So what was the inspiration behind the seven S?
That's very
That's very,
interesting. There are a few things because a lot of the text I had already written before I created the book. So it's also a bundle of a lot of things that I had already written, maybe
okay.
like half of it. The other half I started writing once the whole idea for the book became came in my mind. So at some point I was already looking at the stuff that I had written, and I noticed that some parts were about suffering, some parts were about the serenity, some parts were about sincerity. And at some point I was like, I write often from my own perspective. So I realized, I remember I was in a place of suffering when I wrote this part on suffering.
Mm.
And I was in a place of stillness when I wrote about stillness. At some point I could see a bit of a process there, my own process. So then I looked at the process, and also I projected a little bit like a roadmap onto it. And I thought, oh yeah, first there's suffering. But to come out of your suffering, what do you need? You need to be very sincere. Sincerity, you need to be really honest with yourself. What's going on? Am I running away from things? Am I not willing to see things clearly? So I realized, sincerity is also important. So then I put sincerity after suffering. Um, and anywhere, it naturally, I started looking at it, and I put all these, I put it almost like a roadmap. It's not a roadmap. It's not like 7 steps to peace. It's not like that. It's also a bit of a way to structure the book, but it does go progressively from a state of suffering more into openness and serenity at some point. But the funny thing was, it was a complete coincidence that all the words started with the S: sincerity,
Yeah,
suffering,
really?
stillness. And I remember that a friend of mine, I sent her the manuscript, and she said, "Wow, did you know that the word, the S comes from a root word shin? I think in Hebrew, if I remember correctly. I forgot about it. It's not on top of my mind anymore. And the original meaning is a symbol, is a tooth." And I was like, this is interesting. So she said, maybe there's a
Mm.
spirit, there's a meaning behind this. Look it up for yourself. What does a tooth symbolize? And I realized that the tooth symbolized chewing. You're chewing, right? And all of a sudden I realized, like, wait a minute. what I've been doing my whole life is chewing on all these experiences and on all these ideas to
Hmm.
make them more digestible. So you could almost say that the book is the result of my endless chewing on experiences, ideas, concepts to turn them into digestible um,
Yes.
bites for other
Vegetable
people so
bites.
that they can digest them. So that's what
Yes.
that was a funny. I thought that was quite funny because um, that's how I write. They're always like little bites that people can
Hmm.
open the book at any place and they can just take a few bites, digest it, and let it marinate, and then see what happens to them. So that's how I
Hmm.
started seeing the book. Yeah.
That's very
Does that
interesting.
answer
Is
your
that
question?
why? Yeah, it does. Because I mean, it makes it a nice question where I realize how concise your books is. Like you pack the message, so it makes so much sense. It's like chilled wisdom, just like what you said, where it's like you want to make it digestible. So is that why you made like very concise and sharing personal experience?
Yeah. But that's also the most difficult thing. For me, it's way easier to write a very long book. It's way more difficult to write a short book because
It is. It is.
I always try to say a lot in very few words, and that's very difficult. And I've sometimes
Yes.
like played in my mind with one sentence for like hours. If I'm meditating sometimes in a long silence retreat, I sometimes play with the sentence. I try to formulate a complex idea in one sentence, and then
Hmm.
it's very difficult.
It
And
is. I
uh,
can
and
understand.
I hope what it does, and I do hear this in the feedback from people. They say like, "Hey, it's very concise, but it's also still profound." So, and
Yes.
that's very difficult. I hope to achieve that, to make it concise or at least short enough, but not too simplistic.
Yes.
Simple, but not too simple, because otherwise it becomes oversimplification. And that's the endless struggle. That's what I always find difficult about writing.
Yes, it is. It is. But you did it. You did it, and I'm so happy. I'm so glad because you're able to
Well, thank
achieve
you.
that success. Yeah. So I want to before we round up because we're running out of time. I want to just talk about spirituality because personally, as someone from a Muslim background, I could relate a lot to um the spirituality moment in a story. And I don't know why I keep saying story because it feels so much like a story to me. It doesn't feel like a self-help book. It feels like I'm reading something like a story, an impactful story. Let me put it that way. So, what made you? What was that moment that made you want to like? Okay, I want anyone reading from whatever religion you or whatever background you have. I want you to be able to relate with it. Was that something you had in mind, or you just wanted to share your experience, and along the line, you made it something where people could reconnect to their essence and even look deep into the meaning of religion, which means reconnect, just like what you said in your book. So is this something that was like an
Yeah.
intentional movement? Hmm. I
So
like
my
that.
intention was to. Um, it's interesting when I reposted the Laureate Award on my Instagram. People started congratulating me a lot, and it said best self-help book 2026. So one of my readers said, "No, it's not self-help; it's soul finding." And it's funny because
It is.
because perhaps that's what I that brings us back to the beginning of the conversation. A part
Mm.
of my writing comes, and I try to not part of a religion. I'm not part of a spiritual tradition. I try to look at it more like, for me, spirituality or the spiritual traditions are systems, just like religions are systems or teachings that soul to one another. And what I like about the word religion, if I don't think about it in terms of a organized religion like Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, or all the religions. But if you look at the word religion, there are two roots. There's one is religare, which
Yeah.
means to rebind or to reconnect. And to me, religion, not from an organized religion, but from a personal perspective, my own religious quest, from a personal perspective, is about rebinding, remembering perhaps even, reconnecting myself to life, to other people, to the transcendent. The other meaning of the word religion comes from religio. Religio is a word that kind of means the opposite of neglect. It's a kind of attention to pay very good attention. That's the other meaning. And for me, that's also part of what a religious or spiritual practice does, is to help you pay attention in a way that, and attention is a very interesting thing because there are different kinds of attention. There's a kind of colonializing, consumptive attention that wants to get
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
Like binge watching. Binge watching is like a consumptive, consuming attention that wants to get. But there's also the kind of attention you need to finish your to-do list. It's like goal-oriented attention. But there's another attention that we forget about often, which is this open contemplative attention that draws us back to the present moment, that opens us up, that is silent,
Mm.
that's here and now. And I think that's what a religious or spiritual practice also does. It rebinds us back to the
Right.
present moment,
Yes.
where life is, where all of it is. All of it comes back to the present moment. Now, people make people often think that the present moment is a moment in time, but that's not what it is. The present time, moments come and go in this present moment, but the present moment itself never goes. It never comes, it
It
never
never
goes.
does.
It's ever present. It's right here, right now. Now,
Mm.
that's what I hope that the book does,
It
is
does.
to bring people back right here, right now,
Hmm. That's a very interesting
to pay
point.
attention.
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, being in a moment. It brings me back to one. There's a part in your book where you mentioned about your book. You've seen your book as an ancient wisdom for modern day people. So, what do you think
Yeah.
is that important thing modern day society has lost? Important wisdom. We're supposed to live right, so just adapt as a society.
I think we have, if I look at myself previously, but also a lot of people around me, the way modern society is organized, it's very
Yes.
mechanistic. It's very technical.
Mm.
Um, it's very linear. And also the way we look at time, I mean, clock time is a human invention. Clocks are a human invention. And the clocks make us believe that time is linear, that we go to the future, that we add time. We're in
Yes,
2026, then the
that's how it is.
2027.
Even the
But what we have
24 hours
forgotten
time.
about, we have forgotten about what the Greeks called kairos. The Greeks talked about time in different ways. They had chronos, which is chronological order, like our clock time, but they also had kairos, which is more like timing, like the inner moment. That's like adjusting, attuning yourself to the moment. And instead of this linear view, which always thinks about a goal, like I need to get to this goal, I need to get to this moment, I need to get there, have this, have that. What I think that has been lost, that I hope to restore a little bit, is to look at time more from an eternity perspective. What does that mean? Not eternity as everlasting time, but as the ever present now. Because the now is the only thing you can never escape. You're always caught in this moment. And perhaps this moment is all there ever is. And again, that
Mm, I
brings us
get
back
that.
to it. And I think that's a lot of people I see running around, afraid that they miss out, afraid that they stay behind. They need to run faster, compete with the other person. Otherwise, they end up, as a loser or whatever. That's the whole mind. We just keep running, running, running. And then at the end of your life, you ran and ran and ran, and you realize you were never really present. And that's
Mm,
why I like one of my favorite philosophers was Alan Watts. He said something so beautiful about this. He said that we cheated ourselves the whole way down the line. We looked at life as a journey with a serious purpose at the end. But he said it was a musical thing, and you're supposed to sing or to dance while the music was being played. And I really like that.
interesting.
Maybe life is not about getting somewhere, achieving something. I mean, yes, we have goals in life, but goals are always means. But the point is, to what end? I like what Simone Weil said. She said, beauty is the only thing that is no goal. There are no goals on earth. Everything that we call goals are just means. But the whole point of life is just to live it. And people are
That's
so
really
scared, running around, trying to search for something. But what if the beauty of life is in living it with attention?
in the moment.
Yeah, and to connect, to contribute, to express, and to sing and to dance. And of course, we need to work. But I think the whole point that I'm referring to is what the ancient Greeks still understood. They understood that leisure, what we now call spare time, but that used to mean like inner peace or inner silence, that was the basis of culture. The Greeks still understood that even, I think it was Plato, or no, it was Aristotle. Aristotle said that we are unleisurely so that we can have leisure. In other words, we work so that we can live and enjoy life. But modern people turn it around. They think they live so that they can work. And in ancient times, I think that's something we've lost, is we make life all about productivity, about work, efficiency, getting this, getting that. And
Yes,
then
in variety of sense.
we forget that the beauty is right here in this moment, in front of us, around us.
Mm.
And I remember one day I was in a meditation retreat. I was so quiet. I was so at peace. I sit on a bench and a bird came next to me, a little bird. And it looked at me and I looked at the bird. And I was so moved by it because I realized I'm so busy in Amsterdam. I don't have these moments because I'm constantly running, running, running. But how
Yes.
beautiful it is to just share a moment with a bird,
Right.
to look a bird in the eye and to have this moment of connection. For me, that was beautiful. And I realized
That's
maybe
interesting.
life is about, maybe the beauty is right here, but we forget to see it.
Yes. It's a beauty because it's right here, living in the moment. It's true, true. Thank you so much. Really running out of time. I would have loved to play another game, but I think
Yeah.
we've run out of time.
I have to leave as well because I have another appointment. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that conversation. Okay, before we round it up finally, how do you feel about the African Laureate Awards? How did you feel when you get the recognition?
Yeah, I'm very thankful for the recognition, for the award. I didn't expect it, so I'm very happy. And thanks again for inviting me for the interview as well. I hope people can hear it properly because the sound is a bit off sometimes, but I hope that can be
Yeah,
corrected.
it's
But
cool. I'll
thanks a lot
try.
for having me. I'm very
Thank
appreciative
you
of the
so
award,
much.
and
Thank you.
it was a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you too. It's been an insightful conversation. I've learned a lot personally, and I would really hope everyone listening, watching this, also learning a lot as well. So thank you for sharing your journey, your reflection, and your work with us. To everyone listening, watching, this is a Laureate Conversation. See you next time. My name is Miriam Obajiko, and this is Alexander Dane Heijer. I don't want to miss the pronunciation. Thank you so much for joining once again. See you
Thank
next
you.
time.